Iranian missiles and drones were launched towards Kuwait and towards Bahrain, while the air defensive systems of both countries went into action. At the same time, American forces intercepted drones over the Strait of Hormuz and struck Iranian radar and surveillance sites in the areas of Kesham and Sirik. Iran claims it hit American assets. Washington denies that its forces were hit. So why now, precisely when Pakistan is trying to keep the mediation channel alive, is the Gulf burning again? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your ground report on what's happening here in Israel, in the Middle East, and in the wider war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the region. Today we are going into one of the most dangerous moments of the past week: negotiations under fire. And it is important to understand this from the very beginning. This is not a story of either war or negotiations. In today's Middle East, both are happening at the same time. The Americans are talking with Iran through mediators, but at the same time, they're enforcing a naval blockade. Iran is reviewing draft agreements, but at the same time, it is launching missiles and drones towards the Gulf states, towards Bahrain, Oman, the United Arab Emirates. Israel continues to operate against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Iran is trying to insert the Lebanese front as part of the price of the next agreement. It looks like diplomacy, but it is moving at the pace of war. And the latest move began even before the fire broke towards Kuwait and towards Bahrain. At the end of May and the beginning of June, United States Central Command struck radar sites, air defensive systems, and drone control positions in the areas of Guruk and Qasem Island. The background was downing of an American MQ-1 drone, which according to Washington was operating over international waters. The American presented the strike as defensive. The message to Tehran was clear: if you use Qasem and the southern coast of Iran to threaten shippings in the Gulf, those places are no longer protected. Keshem is not just another island on the map. It sits opposite the Strait of Hormuz, close to one of the most important maritime passages in the world. From there, ships can be monitored. From there, control stations can be operated. From there, drones, missiles, and surveillance systems can be managed. Systems that threaten not only the American Navy, but also everyone moving oil, gas, and goods through the Gulf. On June 2nd, the picture expanded. Iran launched ballistic missiles towards neighboring countries. 2 missiles towards Kuwait fell or broke apart on the way. 3 missiles towards Bahrain were intercepted by the American and the Bahraini defensive systems. At the same time, American forces intercepted 3 Iranian suicide drones that had been launched towards civilian ships in the area. After that, they struck an Iranian control station on Qasem Island. In other words, we are no longer talking only about a shadow war. We're talking about direct exchanges of fire between the United States and Iran, near the most sensitive energy artery in the world. Then came the night that delivered the message to the Gulf states in the clearest way possible. The United States disabled a tanker named M/T Lexia, using a Hellfire missile that was fired at its engine room. According to the American version, the tanker tried to break through the naval blockade and sail towards Karag Island in Iran, and after ignoring the repeated warnings for many long hours, it was struck. The goal was not to sink the ship. The goal was to stop it and to say that the blockade on Iranian ports is not a statement at a press conference. It is being enforced on the ground. Iran responded quickly. The Revolutionary Guards presented the American action as a direct strike against them and launched missiles and drones towards the Gulf. Some were intercepted, some failed. But then came the more serious hit. An Iranian attack struck a terminal at Kuwait International Airport. 1 person was killed. 63 were wounded. Air activity was damaged. a civilian area became a battlefield. That was a turning point. Until that moment, it was still possible to argue that the confrontation was mainly around ships, bases, radars, and military positions. But when a civilian airport in Kuwait was hit, the message was different. Iran is not only threatening the American soldiers, it is willing to turn Arab countries hosting American forces into part of the pressure on Washington. Tehran tried to distance itself from the responsibility. It claimed the damage was caused by a failed American interceptor. United States Central Command rejected that claim and said it was an Iranian attack against a civilian target. That gap matters because this is exactly the Iranian method: strike, deny, claim self-defense, and then use the confusion to continue negotiations as if nothing happened. On June 6th, the front ignited again. Iran launched missiles and drones towards Kuwait and towards Bahrain. Bahrain announced that the threats were intercepted. The Revolutionary Guards claimed that they had hit Ali El Salem Air Base in Kuwait and the headquarters of the 5th Fleet in Bahrain. The United States denied any damage to its forces or to its assets. But even if the Iranian claims are exaggerated, the choice of targets says a lot. Iran wants to remind the Americans that every base in the Gulf can become a point of pressure. Every Arab partner of Washington can pay a price. And every day without an agreement can become a day in which one more interceptor misses. And this is where the Pakistani letter enters the picture. While all of this is happening, Pakistan's Interior Minister, Mushin Naqvi, arrived in Tehran as part of the regional mediation efforts. According to reports, he arrived with a special letter from Pakistan's leadership to the Supreme Leader, Mujtaba Khamenei. The content of the letter has not been published by a reliable open source, so this must be said very carefully. We know that Pakistan delivered an urgent message to the Iranian leadership. We do not know for certain what was written inside this letter. But the delivery itself matters. The letter was not sent only to the Iranian Foreign Ministry. It was meant to reach the core of the regime's power, the place where the real decisions are made, around Khamenei, around the Revolutionary Guards, around those who hold the missiles, the drones, the mines, and the ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz altogether. Pakistan is an interesting mediator, but also a complicated one. On one hand, it has channels of communication with Iran, and Tehran sees it as less identified with the Americans than Oman or Qatar. For years, they also knew how to serve as a useful channel for passing messages around Iran. On the other hand, Pakistan is not sitting outside of this game. It has a large Shiite population. It has a sensitive border with Iran in the Balochistan area. It is worried about internal unrest, fuel prices, trade disruptions, and the need to choose between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And that's not all. While trying to mediate, Pakistan also holds deep security ties with Saudi Arabia. And according to reports, it even employed around 8,000 soldiers in Saudi Arabia, a squadron of around 16 JF-17 aircrafts, 2 drone squadrons, and HQ-9 systems. In other words, Pakistan is trying to put out a regional fire while part of its own forces are positioned on the side that fears that same fire. So, Pakistan is not only trying to save this agreement, it is also trying to save itself. It does not want a prolonged Iranian war on its border. It does not want internal Shiite unrest. It does not want a deeper fuel crisis. And it does not want to reach a moment where it must openly choose between Tehran and Riyadh. Oman is in a different position. But the pressure on it is no less intense. Geographically, Oman is part of the story of the Strait of Hormuz. Every mechanism for passage, every maritime inspection system, every transit fee, every attempt to clear mines or secure free movement directly concerns Oman. And so, When Iran tries to promote the idea of Iranian management or a new mechanism in the Strait, Oman cannot stand aside. Tehran is trying to present its mechanism as an orderly management system for traffic in the Strait. Ships will receive approval, pay fees, and pass under the guidance of the Revolutionary Guards. A body was even established under the name Persian Gulf Strait Authority. But in American eyes, this is not maritime bureaucracy. It is an attempt to turn an international shipping lane into a source of power for the Iranian regime. The United States has already imposed sanctions on that mechanism. From Washington's perspective, anyone who pays in order to pass through Hormuz is not only paying a transit fee, he may be funding a system that threatens ships, energy, and American allies. Oman, for its part, is trying to walk a very thin line. It does not want to look like it accepts the Iranian control over the Strait. It also does not want to be dragged into a direct confrontation with Tehran. And it certainly does not want the United States to force it to cut ties with Iran, because from Muscat's point of view, that relationship is exactly what allows it to be a mediator. Qatar enters the picture as another channel. Qatari representatives arrived in Tehran in coordination with the United States in order to help the efforts to reach a final agreement. This is not surprising, because Qatar has served before as a back channel between Washington and Tehran, but it too is not completely clean. It's not a clean, neutral mediator. It has deep interests in the Gulf, in gas, and in the regional stability. It wants an agreement, but not an agreement that sends an economic and a security shockwave in its direction. And now we need to understand what is on the table. The Americans first want the Strait of Hormuz to be opened up, not a symbolic opening and not passage under the mercy of the Revolutionary Guards. They want shipping traffic to be restored to the pre-war conditions within 30 days. They want the ceasefire extended by 60 days. They want a clear Iranian commitment not to develop nuclear weapons. And they want an agreed mechanism to deal with the stockpile of enriched uranium. Secretary of State Marco Rubio presented it in a two-stage method. First, Hormuz. Open up the strait, stop firing on ships, insist on clearing the mines, and do not collect fees. Only after that, serious talks about the nuclear issue will begin. What happens to the stockpile of enriched uranium? How it is removed from Iran or destroyed under supervision? And what the long-term restrictions on the enrichment will be. The important point is that Rubio made it clear there will be no sanctions relief, only in exchange for opening Hormuz. From the American point of view, opening the Strait of Hormuz is a basic condition for a stable ceasefire, not a prize. Iran is demanding a broader picture. It does not want to talk only about Hormuz. It wants the end of the fighting on all fronts, especially in Lebanon. It wants the gradual release of frozen assets. It wants sanctions relief. And it wants a special mechanism in the Strait of Hormuz that would give it practical influence over maritime passage. According to reports, Washington proposed a 9-point plan. Iran responded with a 14-point document. It sounds technical, but behind the numbers hides a simple truth. The Americans are trying to narrow the agreement to the nuclear issue, Hormuz, and also to shipping and security of the shipping routes. The Iranians are trying to turn it into a huge regional deal, where Lebanon, Hezbollah, the money, the sanctions, and the status of the Revolutionary Guards all enter the same equation. This is where Lebanon comes in, because while Washington tries to negotiate with Tehran, the IDF continues to operate in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. Hezbollah fired mortars towards a UNIFIL post. One United Nations member was killed and 2 others were wounded. The IDF stressed that the trajectory of the fire points to Hezbollah. This matters because Hezbollah continues trying to present itself as Lebanon's protector, but in reality, its fire also hits the international forces that are supposed to maintain stability in the south. Hezbollah also rejected the ceasefire framework between Lebanon and Israel. The organization informed the president of Lebanon that it opposes the agreement and insists that any arrangement must be made again and must be made with the full IDF withdrawal from all its forces from South Lebanon. So, from Israel's point of view, that's not acceptable. It's not an acceptable starting point. Jerusalem is demanding that Hezbollah not remain armed south of the Litani River and that the Lebanese army receive exclusive control in defined areas without armed non-state actors. But Israel is not relying only on paper. Defense Minister Israel Katz is speaking about the reality in which the IDF remains at this stage in the security zone in Lebanon up to the yellow line, including the Beaufort Ridge. This is not only a symbolic place, because Beaufort is a dominant point on the ridge overlooking deep into southern Lebanon. Whoever holds it can influence the movement, the observation, and the launches towards the Galilee. Hezbollah understands this, and that's why it is trying to change its method. After previous pauses, the organization moved to broad use of attack drones and suicide drones. At first, mostly during the day. Later, thermal cameras were also added, allowing activity also at night. The goal was to make IDF troop movement more difficult, strike vehicles and armored forces, and expand the threat towards the broader border communities of Israel like Tzfat, Carmiel, and the Krayot area. Israel is trying to break this equation, not to allow Hezbollah to rebuild its strength under the title of a ceasefire, not to allow Iran to save its Lebanese arm through an agreement with America, and not to reach a situation where in a few months Hezbollah returns with a drone array. The Radwan forces, commando unit of Hezbollah, control rooms, and also firing positions only under worse diplomatic conditions for the Jewish state of Israel. And that's why Lebanon has become a central point of dispute in the negotiations between the United States and Iran. From Tehran's point of view, Hezbollah is not just a Lebanese problem, it is a strategic asset. If Iran is being required to open Hormuz, to talk about uranium, and to observe the economic pressure, it wants to make sure that in the meantime, Israel does not crush its most important asset in the Arab world. So the negotiations are no longer only about the nuclear issue. They're about the question of who can enforce an agreement in the Middle East. Can Iran really restrain the Revolutionary Guards? Will Hezbollah receive an order from Tehran to stop? Is the Lebanese army really capable of dismantling terrorist infrastructure? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, a good question is, can Oman truly guarantee free passage through Hormuz if the ships are sailing close to it? And also, can Pakistan or Qatar pass messages without becoming part of the pressure themselves? I want to invite you now to take part in something real that's happening here in Israel, something that is rooted in the land and in our hearts, especially now when the fighting in the north continues. I call on you to help us invest in the northern communities of Israel that were struck by multiple rockets, drones, and terrorists of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. We are launching the Rebuild Israel campaign. We're bringing life back to Israel's north. So along Israel's northern border, an area that is marked by war, displacement, and loss, we are planting an apple orchard. Not as a symbol for a single moment, but as part of a long-term commitment to rebuild what was damaged. So this orchard is more than just agriculture. It creates jobs for local families. It helps communities return and rebuild, and it sends a clear message to the people of Israel and also to our enemies that we are here to stay. We're not afraid. So when you donate, you're not just giving, you're not just planting an apple tree, you are rebuilding. Your support does put trees on the ground. It does restore livelihoods, and it also transforms land that is scarred by war into a land that grows again. And this is how renewal takes root. This is how Israel rebuilt after war. So join us in restoring the north and strengthening the future of the land of Israel. Go now to tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael, or call 800-804-7895. Again, that's 800-804-7895. And plant a tree in Israel's northern communities where Hezbollah destroyed the apple orchard. We're going to plant it back and bring the people to the north. Stand with Israel. And now, the Iranian nuclear issue. The American and the Israeli strikes badly damaged Iran's nuclear program, but they did not solve the whole problem, because the IAEA is warning today that it cannot fully verify the size, the compensation, or the location of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. It also cannot determine with certainty whether Iran has stopped enrichment activities or continued. The central number is 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. That's not nuclear weapons grade, but it is technically close to 90%, the level required for fissile material for a weapon. Rafael Grossi warned that a stockpile like this could theoretically be enough for around 10 bombs if Iran decided to enrich it further and build a weapon. It's important to say that this is not proof that Iran has a nuclear weapon. It is a warning about the potential. And that's exactly what worries Washington and Jerusalem, because if the facilities were attacked, the inspectors are not entering, and the material has already been moved or dispersed into deep and fortified sites, then the West knows that there was materials, and knows there was a strike, and knows oversight was damaged, but it does not know with certainty where all of it is located today. So from Iran's point of view, this is a strong bargaining card. It does not have to defeat the United States militarily. It is enough that it can still threaten Hormuz, launch drones, hold a large part of its missile stockpile, and keep the uranium issue in a gray zone. As long as that gray zone exists, it can come to the table and say, if you want certainty, pay up. And according to published assessments, despite the damage to the missile industry and the launch systems, Iran still holds a significant part of the missile stockpile that it had before this war began. Rubio himself, he said that Iran still has many drones because this is a reality, that it's a cheap technology. It's very easy to produce. In other words, even if the Iranian Navy was damaged, even if the command systems were hit, even if the economy is being choked, the ability to harass and escalate has not disappeared. And this explains why the Gulf states are living with a double fear. They do not like the Revolutionary Guards. They see them as a direct threat. Kuwait, Bahrain, and the Gulf Cooperation Council strongly condemn the Iranian attacks, but they also have another fear, one that is less comfortable to talk about. What happens if the Revolutionary Guards became weak enough to lose control, but not weak enough to disappear completely? Who holds the missiles? Who knows where the mines were placed in the Strait of Hormuz? Who controls the drones? Who guards the nuclear facilities? And who guards the uranium? Who prevents the missiles and the militias and the terrorists and the opposition groups and the factions or the criminal actors from taking control of advanced weapons? The nightmare of the Gulf states is not only a strong Iran, it is also a collapsing Iran, a state with missiles, uranium, militias, wounded Revolutionary Guards, and internal power struggles. A situation like that could be even more dangerous than a stable and hostile Iranian regime. And this is where we need to understand the American strategy. Washington is now conducting diplomacy through force. It puts an agreement on the table, but keeps a credible military threat in the air. From the perspective of the hawkish line in the United States, this is exactly the source of pressure. Iran entered negotiations only after military, economic, and naval blows. If the threat disappears, the American leverage disappears as well. In other words, the negotiations are not an alternative to a strike. They are part of the pressure mechanism. You can see it in the demands. Open Hormuz, stop firing on ships, deal with the mines, no Iranian transit fees. After that, uranium. After that, supervision. And only at the end, maybe relief on funds or on sanctions. This is not a deal where both sides arrive calm. This is a deal where the Americans are trying to bring Iran to the point where it understands that the price of refusal is higher than the price of concession. But we need to be careful. This does not mean for certain that the United States is on the way to a total war. The American force in the region is built mainly for air and naval strikes, not for a large ground operation or full regime change. There is the ability to strike radars, missiles, launchers, drone arrays, Revolutionary Guards bases, naval assets, and economic infrastructure. There are fewer signs of a broad move in the style of Iraq 2023. And Trump is also under pressure. He's under pressure to present a diplomatic achievement. A temporary 60-day agreement could give him something to sell to the American public. Hormuz is open, energy prices are calm. And in the meantime, until we understand all the options, all the answers, I'm calling on all of you to pray for this situation. Keep praying for the Iranian people, above all, to get rid of this terrible, tyrannical regime. Pray for wisdom to our leaders, to the President of the United States, to the Prime Minister of Israel, to the Arab leaders in the Gulf. Pray for God to find a way to turn this into an opportunity for cooperation, for peace, and to show that He is in control of this situation. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.